Hi, this is 365801 and this is another reviewing male-male romance video, and this is for The Magic Between. The Magic Between is by Stephanie Hoyt, and I was lucky enough to get an advanced reader copy, so thank you to NetGalley and 9 Star Press for giving me this book before it was actually published. Just so you know, the release date for this title is the 15th of February 2022. I read it on release day, and so by the time this video goes up, it will be available for you to buy. Now, I have to admit to not being entirely sure as to which demographic or genre this book really falls under. As it was a 9 Star Press release, I had just assumed that it was going to be a male-male romance and quite a bit steamy, you know, that kind of thing. But reading through it, I wasn't entirely sure if it was considered a young adult or a new adult, or if it was queer, or if it was LGBTQIA+, like what was the categories, who was the intended audience, was I the intended audience, and I wasn't really sure. I'm just gonna kind of put it under male-male romance for now, but I'm gonna talk about it. Now, before I give you a summary of the plot and get into any of the specifics about the book, I just want to say I did enjoy it. It was something that I liked and enjoyed and had a good time reading on the whole, but I will go through my ratings at the end of the video. Just so you know, it was a good one and I liked it. Now, the official release for The Magic Between states that in a world where everyone has magic coursing through them, legend says magic itself craves a mate. Legend says those with opposite magics have the greatest chance of forming the unbreakable bond it desires. But legend never said anything about what to do when sparks fly between two people opposite in more ways than just magic. So because I enjoy fantasy and magic elements in modern or contemporary settings, I do think that this was what appealed to me most, but there were also elements such as a sports romance and pop music and bisexual representation. So these were the things that really appealed to me. Now, I do think it will be a good idea for me to structure this review by going through some of the pros, first of all, maybe some other issues that are neither pros or cons, and then maybe just looking at some cons at the end that would affect maybe my rating and that might be useful for you to know before you go in. Now, the first pro for me for sure is the two main male characters. The first one is A.B. Cerise, who is a pop star, and he is out and he is bisexual, and he has the magical ability to turn invisible. Unfortunately, he's also nursing kind of a broken heart. He's had his heart broken. He's kind of a bit jaded when it comes to romance and relationships being played out in the public, which of course he has to do because he is this great pop star. And he is dealing with some mental health issues, especially when it comes to anxiety and obsessive compulsive issues too. So he is not really in the best frame of mind to meet someone who could possibly be a bond mate for him. On the other hand, we get Matthew Hellman Lavoie, who is a prospect goalie for the NHL. He's going to be one of the main picks for the draft. He is part of a hockey dynasty, and so he is very much a jock and apparently a straight man who is very romantic and looking for not only the love of his life but a bond mate too. He also happens to have a magic ability, which is to see the unseeable, making both A.B. Cerise and Matthew Hellman Lavoie opposites. So they're both opposites in character, but opposites in their magic too. And that's what creates this spark between the two of them that they can't really deny. AB seems really maybe a little bit hesitant at first to get to know Matthew because he, one, doesn't want to get involved with some straight boy. He doesn't necessarily need any more friends in his life, and he's very unsure about his magic, whereas Matthew is very much wanting this bond mate. He wants to have a relationship with AB, but is obviously just looking for some sort of friendship. He's a bit downhearted at the fact that his bond mate or possible bond mate isn't a woman, until he really starts to get to know AB and maybe get to know himself a little bit better too. As I said, this is a real pro. These two characters were delightful. They were super sweet. Their slow burn romance was just so nice, and getting to know both of them and their friends and their extended friend groups, it was a really nice part of the book. I really liked how they interacted with each other. There was a lot of consent discussions about how far or which way and what way they were going to be doing it. There was a lot of discussions in general, but there was a lot of very nice, sweet moments between the two of them, and that was really enjoyable to read. Now, another big pro for me was the representation or sexual representation within this book. There is a lot of bisexual representation, and I haven't read too many books that are involving two main male characters who are both bisexual, and I think that's really something that I would like to look at more. But it's not just the bisexual representation. There was the bisexual awakening, which I love. Mwah, chef's kiss. I always love a bisexual awakening. But there was also a lot of representation of other sexualities and genders within the greater cast of characters, and there was so much acceptance of that by the main characters and their family and friends. Obviously not necessarily in the wider world, so I'm gonna put it out here just now. Content warnings or trigger warnings, have a wee check, because I do think there is an element of homophobia addressed, and so you do need to be aware of that if that's something that's going to make you feel uncomfortable. Check the content and trigger warnings before you go in. And the next thing I'm going to discuss is neither a pro or a con, because it's actually kind of both, and that's the magic system that's within place within the book. Now, I actually really enjoyed the magic system from what I could work out and gather by the end. It was in the advanced copies a prologue blog post that you read and got really confused about, and I'm assuming that the publishers got that kind of feedback, and so for the actual official release they have updated the prologue to something different. So I'm not sure what the prologue is like in the official release, but I read it and I had to kind of think about it and take notes, because it wasn't as clear or as understandable as it probably could have been. But I kind of read through it about 3 times before I went into the actual story, so that I could kind of in my head work out what was going on. I think it could have been a little bit more concise, and so hopefully that's been addressed. But throughout the book, I feel like it wasn't as understandable and it wasn't as utilised as it probably could have been. I understood certain characters' magic, but not all the characters' magic, and not all the ways that society utilises or navigates the magic in their society or for each individual. I feel like the author themselves has probably done loads of work on making this magical system, but it wasn't really utilised to its full potential. I feel like it could have been more. I wanted a bit more from the magic, and in fact I think some of the other characters and their magic and their lives could be used in future books. So hopefully Stephanie Hoyt gets some good sales on The Magic Between, so that she can think about perhaps writing some of the other characters' stories and looking at their magic too. This was really interesting, but the fact that she had done so much work on the magic, but the bond mates still were confusing because the characters themselves didn't understand it, meant that overall as the readers there was a bit of confusion there too. So yeah, there was the magic system, which was super cool and interesting but confusing, and I don't think that it was made any clearer by the writing. So on to a couple of small cons, and I do think I do need to mention these, because if someone was to watch this and think that was a really fantastic book and then would have a read and go, what on earth was she talking about? She never mentioned this. I need to mention it. The first is pacing. There was certainly a bit of pacing issues, because if I have to be honest, this is very character driven. We're in the heads and minds and in conversations, a lot of conversations with these characters. And I do think that this meant that the plot was lacking, or at least in the writing, it didn't provide the tension for the plot points that would have provided more interest and would have made this a speedier read in points. It dragged in places, and there was a point halfway through when I actually considered DNFing, which I'm really glad I didn't, because I carried on and I really enjoyed it. But because there's that lull kind of halfway through, and it's quite a slog to get through, if you don't get to benefit from the ending, which is a really lovely, sweet, romantic conclusion. But I do think there will be some readers who find the pacing and the lack of tension building that might make them think that they don't want to read this. Now, the second con I want to mention is the writing, or writing style, writing choices. I'm not sure how to say it. I'm not entirely sure what it was about the writing, but it just didn't suit my tastes as much as I wanted it to. And because I had so much like, oh, this is great, it's got magic, it's got sports, it's got pop music, it's got all these bi-awakening, bi-representation, fantastic. I wanted to really enjoy it. I wanted to love this story, and I can't say that I did because of the writing. For example, and it might be to do with the pacing and plot, there was a focus on something and you'd have like a full paragraph of two people talking. So for example, Matthew chatting with his sister Maddie about an issue to do with AB, and then in the very next paragraph he would go and visit AB and have the exact same conversation with him. There would be repetition, and there would be no rise and fall of tension, because he spoke to Maddie, she said, hey, here's some advice, he took the advice and he went off and he spoke to AB. There was lots of dialogue. So when there's like such healthy relationships, such healthy dialogue, you got great supportive characters, there's no tension. So for me, also there was repetition, and I just thought you didn't need that. And there was a lot of times when I thought this whole paragraph can go, or this whole paragraph can get condensed to one sentence. So for me, the need for more editorial input was probably there. Also, there was an awful lot of dialogue, and often I didn't know who it was that was speaking, especially when there was multiple characters in the room, so they didn't say who it was that had said something. So I don't know if it was his friend or his other friend or his other friend. So there was definitely aspects. I think also there might have been some tense issues as to who was being referred to when, and so when it was someone's thought versus when it was the narrator, that was definitely an issue as well. So for me, the writing style and the writing quality made it a little bit less enjoyable than it probably could have. The other issue was that it made me feel, especially at the, say, 1/3 mark, I really sat down and thought, wow, this is not an adult romance book. This is YA, because the level of the language, now this is in no disrespect to YA, but it really felt like that I am not the target audience. Yeah, I'm like an old lady, and these characters are 21-year-olds. So their dialogue I would expect to be for 21-year-olds, which is fine. But the rest of the text, the rest of the prose, should not necessarily reflect that base or unsophisticated level. I needed more, I wanted more, and I thought this definitely could have more literary technique, a little bit more maturity in the writing. It felt like this was a YA novel in the younger sense, skewed younger. So for me, there was definitely issues with the writing, which made me feel like it was, once again, not living up to the full potential that it could have been. And I know maybe I just have, I say this a lot, like when I read something and think, this needed an editor, maybe my standards are just a little bit too high. Maybe it's me. I'm the common denominator here. So if you have read this and you have a different opinion on the writing style, please let me know. If you agree, let me know as well, because it's something that I think was ultimately a detracting point. So overall, what did I think of the magic between? 1, super cute characters. Absolutely loved AB and Matthew. Thought they were delightful. Wanted a lot more of them. Actually wanted a lot more of their first encounter after their first date. Thank you very much. What was that fade to black all about? That's when I really thought, oh, hold on, this is YA. You can imagine. So yeah, there was bi representation, bi awakening, sports with NHL. There was some pop music and pop star references. There was a lot of fandom and online spaces. There was use of group chats and social media posts, which also added to the YA feel. And there was illustrations already. So if you like illustrations or fan art of characters, then you will enjoy the fact that this comes with it within the book. But all of these things added to my sense of YA-ness or new adultness. I'm not even sure if it was that much of a new adult. And it wasn't until later on that there was maybe a little bit more sexual activity going on. And I'm like, they're 21. Like, they're 21. Yes, they've had experience. So I think that overall there were so many positive things about it that I did enjoy it. But some of the things that I mentioned, the pacing and the writing style, kind of did detract. So in terms of my rating overall, at one point I was thinking, oh, this sounds fantastic, really good at the start. I'm going to give this a 4.5. Then it went right down to a 3. There was a point when I was like, DNF? I'm thinking I might DNF. And then by the time I finished it, I think, okay, it's between a 3.5 and a 3.75. So I'm not too sure. For my Goodreads, I'm probably going to put it down as a 4-star read, because I think it would probably be more like a 3.75 as my final rating. Because the good things were good. And so I do think it deserves some readers, and I don't want to put anyone off. And I do think people need to read it and see, is it just me? Is it my personal preference for certain writing styles? Let me know in the comments if you have read this and you agree with my review and the points that I've made. What did you think of the illustrations? I thought they were really interesting and good, and I thought it was quite fun to have illustrations in the book. I enjoyed this overall. It was fun and it was young adults in my eyes, but do you think it was something else? Let me know in the comments. Once again, thanks to 9-Star Press and NetGalley, and have a wee read of The Magic Between by Stephanie Hoyt. I am 365801 and I make videos about BL manga, yaoi, male romance and all that good stuff. I hope everyone is well, take care, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!